Okay, let's talk about flow. Flow is an important concept in gamification, and there's a lot of discussion that is wrapped around this idea of flow. So several decades ago, this guy, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, wrote this book on flow, and I read this long before I was into gamification. I read his book, say, about 2 decades ago, I think, at this point. And what I was studying at the time was something very different than what we talk about here in gamification. What Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi was talking about or was looking for is kind of that Zen state. You know, when you're involved in something and you get way into it, and all of a sudden you look up and hours have gone by and it only felt like a few minutes. And so Csikszentmihalyi was going and looking at, doing research on where this state was appearing in different areas. So of course, say meditation and spiritual practices, but on the job, in education, and so on. So when it came to the discussion in gamification, his book and his name started popping up again, and I couldn't really understand where his work was being applied. So I went back, read his book, read some of the blogs on this concept, and sure enough, it is important to the experience of gamification. So what Csikszentmihalyi, he has this grid where he balances challenge and skill level. Challenge on the left, the vertical, skill level down there at the bottom, the horizontal. And the flow channel is when we're right there in between where our skill level and the challenge are in balance. So for instance, if something is too high on the challenge side of things, our skill doesn't quite match it, we move into that frustration or anxiety stage. So for instance, in the onboarding for level 2 certification, we started in relatively slowly. On the level 1, if you remember, we had to jump right into it because we wanted to lay a groundwork. This is what is important to gamification. Don't just start out with the fun stuff. We want to start out with the building blocks. And especially for those of you who went through the online version of level 1, you can remember there was quite a bit of anxiety and frustration at the beginning because you were right in the middle of it right away. We didn't have the time to move into it, to ease into it like we would, say, in a live training. So on the other side, which you have not experienced, but you didn't experience it with Sententia, but you might have experienced it in other areas, is what happens if your skill level is high, but the challenge is low. And that's where boredom comes in. We already know this stuff, we've already gone through it, and it's just boring because it's below our skill level. And so when it comes to flow, what we want is that middle there, the nice balance between challenge and our skill level. So on this slide here, what you're seeing is we actually broke this down. So we have the onboarding over there, and then we get into habit forming and then mastery. And the ideal player journey is to move up and move back and forth through the channel flow there, or flow channel. So the challenge might be relatively high, but as we begin to become more comfortable in the onboarding, we say, oh yeah, I know what this is like. Then we're moving closer to boredom, and then maybe we level up, and now we have some more information, and now the anxiety, we're moving up into challenge because our skill set hasn't caught up, and then our skill set catches up, and so on, and then we build through the habit forming, and then ultimately on up to mastery. Of course, Csikszentmihalyi didn't stop right there. He developed this complex chart, if you will, graphic, if you will. And so now you'll see that flow is up there where we just had mastery. So flow in the upper right-hand corner. And as we move into challenge, if we have high challenge and low skill level, that's where we have that anxiety. Now you can see between anxiety and true flow, there's what he's calling the arousal stage, where it's so challenging that we don't quite have the skill set, but we want it. We want to learn how to do this. We want to learn this skill set. On the other side, all the way of anxiety, you can see there's worry where we create stress for our people. So the challenge is so high and the skill level so low that they worry about it before they even become involved. Of course, apathy down at the bottom left, where there is no challenge, low challenge, low skill level, and boredom, which we talked about. But there's also this interesting relaxation stage. So all the way over on the bottom right there's not much challenge, but our skill level is really, really high. And so we're just kind of cruising, we're relaxed, maybe actually just falling asleep, all right? And then, of course, above that, directly below flow, between flow and relaxation, is control. And this is where we're not necessarily growing, but we're in control of what's happening. Okay, so we're not in flow. It's certainly not exciting. It may not be fun for us, but we're in control of it. So it's an interesting, to make it even more complex is what Csikszentmihalyi is looking at here when it comes to the experience, the user experience. But what is probably the most helpful for all of us here when we're creating programs, learning and development programs, is to find that good balance between having the challenge and having the skill. So as they move on up in their skill level, we continue to add challenge. We always want to be adding more challenge, but not so much challenge that it creates stress and anxiety for them, where they begin to worry about, am I going to be able to complete this? Yeah, we can create enough challenge so they're interested in it, but we want to also be continually building their skill level. And so again, this is where we get the level ups. Here we are at onboarding, it's easy. But as they develop skills, then we level them up to create more challenges throughout the process. Okay, so again, great stuff. Not necessarily recommending that you go out and read Csikszentmihalyi's book. It doesn't apply directly to gamification. The principles do, as we've talked about here. The principles certainly do, but the book addresses other states, other mindsets, if you will. But certainly, like I said, great stuff that we can apply to the user experience.